Good morning and welcome to A Closer Look. I'm your host, Linda Fontaine. Today, my guest is Brickey. He is with the Kingsport Fire Department. He is the info officer. He knows all things going on with the fire department. Thank you for being with us today, Barry. He's no stranger to this show. We have him on a lot because he's always full of information. Thank you for being here.
Hey, it's great to be here.
So this week is a special week. Tell me what's going on.
Well, this week is Child Passenger Safety Week, and that is marked all throughout the country to help families learn about child passenger seats. And I can tell you from experience, I've been a child passenger seat technician since about 2006. I've checked over 4,500 seats. That's a lot of seats.
That is a lot of seats.
And of all those seats, I am up to almost 70 of those were in correctly when they came in the first time.
Wow.
I had one this week, actually. It was in right, and I was excited about that. But most of them have a few things that are wrong with them. A lot of times they're not in the seat of the vehicle properly. They're not latched in properly. They're not tight enough. If you can move the seat a whole lot, well, it needs to be tightened up. One of the other things that we look at is the actual belts that are inside the seat. Most of them all have a 5-point harness, and so you have a buckle that goes on the chest, and then straps that go around the hips, and then a buckle with a strap in it for those two straps to buckle into. And a lot of times people will have those too loose, and if any of those belts that are holding the child in the seat are too loose, if something were to happen and you were to have a rollover accident or something, they could come out of it. And so we don't want that to happen.
That's the whole point of the seats, is to keep them safe in the
Absolutely,
seat.
it is. And you know, sometimes one of the bigger things too that we see is that the state law, and this is how it goes, is that a child under the age of 1 has to be in a rear-facing seat. Now, a year and 20 pounds, they can go forward-facing, but the American Academy of Pediatrics say as long as they fit in the parameters of a rear-facing seat, like an infant carrier that is in there, then they can stay in that seat. Most of those now will go up to 25, 30, or even 35 pounds rear-facing, so you can keep the child in there up till about the age 2. It's actually safer for them.
Oh, I didn't realize that. That's really good information. You know, there are some kids that are just small and they get older. I remember when my kids were younger and they had a friend. I mean, my kids were in the booster seats until they go to school. And this one child was just tiny and he was so frustrated because he couldn't sit in the booster seat like everybody else. So that gets kind of hard sometimes, but it's safe. So they have to do it.
We have a lot of families that come in with their kids around the age of 9 or 10. Now, state law says if you're 4'9" and 9 years old, you can come out of a booster seat and sit in a regular vehicle seat. But with that, you have to be able to put your feet flat on the floor. You have to sit back, and then the shoulder belt portion must come right across the collarbone and not up on the neck and things like that. And so I've had a family that comes in, and the mom's a little petite, and her daughter is more petite than she is, and her mom would not let her come out of the booster seat, and she's like 11 years old, and she's like, can I please come out of the booster seat? And it's really about making sure that the belts fit them properly, and then that way they're going to be safe. If the belt comes up on the neck, you can get an injury. If it's not going to be in the right place on the hips, then you can get the child injured. And so a lot of little things go together, whether in a booster seat or in a forward-facing seat with a harness or a rear-facing seat. All those things work together to try to keep that child the safest as possible. And so there's a lot of little tips, things like that, getting it tight, especially like on the shoulders. If the 5-point harness, if you can pinch the belt on the shoulder, then it's too loose. That means the child can get their arm out or they could come out. And so, you know, we need to make sure everything is in good working order also, and that the seat is installed properly, and then that way they work together to protect the child.
Okay, here's a question. Petite adults. Like I have a couple of nieces that are 4'10", 4'11". They are tiny people. Now, what do you do as an adult? Like sometimes my belt does come across like this and I get frustrated, so I just put the belt under my arm. Sometimes I know that's wrong. But what do you do to make it more comfortable if it doesn't come across just right? How can you adjust that?
Well, you can get a belt positioning cushion. It's not a booster seat.
Okay.
You can get a cushion to put underneath yourself when you're sitting in the vehicle. Look for a vehicle that has adjustable pedals. They can telescope in and out, and so can the steering wheel. And then if you look on the pillar beside your head where the belt comes out, a lot of those are actually adjustable, and you don't even realize it. And so I know a lot of times you can adjust, they'll be up in the highest position, and that belt will be up high here, but when you lower it down, it lowers that angle and it comes right across where it's supposed to.
I had no idea. I bet that's the problem with mine. I'm going to check that. That's good advice. Thank you so much.
Well, you're quite welcome, because, you know, like I said, I've shown people that a few times, and I had no idea. I had no idea that that adjusted that way.
I had no idea either, so look at you, already sharing information I can use. So let's talk about fall. Now, burning leaves, it's going to be that time coming up soon. What do people need to know about that?
Well, here inside the city of Kingsport, it is permissible to burn leaves and brush from your property, but we really suggest that you take it out to the curb, because city services will pick it up. And then that way you don't smoke up your neighborhood and things like that. One of my pet peeves is when people burn leaves, it smolders for hours.
Yeah.
That's not burning leaves, that is just making smoke. And they haven't built their fire properly. It needs air, it needs to be able to circulate, and that way your fire will burn a whole lot cleaner and there's less smoke. But if you are going to be burning, it has to be a certain distance away from the home. It should be at least about 50 feet. You have to have something to put it out with. It has to have someone there watching it and making sure that it doesn't spread, because if it does, then you're going to be liable. If something were to come up, some wind would come up, it would blow leaves over toward your neighbor's house, and then if the neighbor's house were to catch on fire, you're liable for that.
Wow.
Now, if you live inside of the county, outside of the city limits, you have to have a permit from the State Forestry Service. That's coming up on October 15th. 239-5811 is the number for that. And they can actually go to BurnSafeTN and tn.org, I believe it is, burnsafetn.org, and you can find out the regulations about what you can burn inside the state of Tennessee. A lot of people say, well, I have this lumber, I was redecorating it or remodeling inside my house, can I burn this stuff? And that's a big no, because you can be fined up to $25,000 if you're burning something that you're not supposed to.
Ooh.
And so, you know, a lot of times if I'm out and I see smoke, I'll investigate, especially depending on the color and how quickly it's going up. Then that tells you that the fire may be hotter and something might be burning other than natural wood or, like, you know, leaves or something. But it's really important, though, that, you know, if you are going to rake up your yard, bring it out to the curb. And then that way, city services can pick it up. There's less worry about the fire. And then, you know, if you are going to have a fire, maybe have a little bonfire, a little small one. Roast you some marshmallows. It's a great time of year to do that.
Oh, that's a fun time of year to do that. Okay, question. If somebody can't pay the $25,000, what happens? Do they have to serve time in jail, or what happens? Seriously.
Oh, you know, I'm not really sure, because they would have to go to court. There is a fine, and, you know, there's probably some time they would have to serve. And so we never want that to happen to anybody.
Right.
And so, you know, it's really about being fire smart and not doing things that could not only endanger you, but endanger others. There have been people in our area here recently. There was a gentleman who was burning a little bit of stuff in his yard, and he didn't know that there was a can inside of it that was pressurized, like an aerosol can or something. It exploded on him and wound up getting really bad burns and had to spend about a month or so in a burn unit. And so there's some big dangers, and we really want people to be safe. And then that way they can enjoy the seasons and, you know, really enjoy their life and not have to get an injury.
Good advice. Cooking. Now, I was talking to you before we started and told you I just bought some of these fire blankets that you put over a grease fire and different things like that. And you said it's better if you just have the lid that fits the pan.
Yeah, anytime you're in the kitchen, and matter of fact, we'll probably talk about that, about fire safety in the kitchen. It's the #1 cause of home fires. But if you were to have a fire in your pan, use the lid that fits it. Now, you may be able to use a cookie sheet or something like that to lay over top of it, and then that way you can smother the fire. And that's really what we're talking about. We're talking about the blanket. But if you put the blanket on there, you're running the risk of tipping the grease over and it spilling out underneath. And so whenever you're in the kitchen, watch what you're cooking, stay with it. And the big thing is, the reason we have fires in the pans is because someone is cooking and they probably have it on high. The eye of a stove, when it's on high, is about 1100 to 1200 degrees. And that is way past the combustion point of any of the greases that you might use or any of the food that you're cooking. And so most of the time, the thing you should do is either have it on medium or medium low to cook it. Now you're thinking, well, that may take a lot longer, but it's going to be able to be controlled cooking, and then that way you're not burning it, or as they call it in some circles, blackened. You know, I think that's really where that came from. Somebody was cooking and they charred it really well.
It's blackened, yeah.
Yeah, it's not burnt, it's just blackened. But you know, there are a lot of great things you can do in the kitchen, and just making sure that there's not anything flammable around the stovetop is one of them. And then make sure you keep a 3-foot area. And that way, no dogs, cats, children, or anything, or somebody who can't cook, come within 3 feet of the stove. And that way you are safer. But if you do have that grease fire, make sure you never take it and pick it up and take it to a sink, because if you were to put water on it, you're going to instantly vaporize that grease, and you could fill your entire kitchen with a fireball.
Wow. Okay. Very good advice. We're going to end on that for right now. We're going to take a break, and we'll come back. We have so much more to talk about for fire safety. Thank you, Barry. We'll be back in just a moment.